All right, Aftershocks, Tremors, we are back once again, guys and gals, to feature some of the best underground and independent hard rock and metal bands across the globe. And today, coming to us from the Steel City of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from 70s proto-glam outfit Limousine Beach, guitarist, vocalist Dave Wheeler is here with us for this episode. Dave, man, what's going on? How you doing? Thanks for coming on Aftershocks.
Hey, doing all right. Got the initial lawn mowing of the season done. And
Awesome, man. Awesome. Great, man. Well, yeah, dude, let's get right into it. Limousine Beach, you guys just released your debut self-titled full-length. It's out now on TP Records. Another solid 70s inspired release, Dave, that you're obviously very well known for. And just like your previous bands, Carousel and Outside Inside, definitely similar sound and style, but with a much different twist and angle. Carousel to me was obviously like more of a pure proto metal band. Outside Inside have more of a groovy blues stoner vibe to it, in my opinion. And now with Limousine Beach, to me, this really has more of those 70s, like it says in the press release, it's glam, kind of inspired. It's also almost got some of that garage punk rock influences as well. To me, if you took Thin Lizzy, MC5, and the Sweet, and you put them in a blender, that's what you get with Limousine Beach. So Dave, go ahead, talk about the new record and what you want to accomplish musically on this record and with this band compared to your other previous work with Carousel and Outside Inside.
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me. It's a real honor to be on the show and just to be invited. So thank you for having me. So I think you nailed it there. I think you got the distinctions between the bands about right. I think with this band, there was a little bit more of a intentional move towards having shorter songs. We had we limited the songs. We tried to make them all under 2.5 minutes. There's one that's over 3 minutes, but so we gave ourselves a couple limitations. And I mean, I think that's where creativity comes from. I mean, for me, I think if you're working within certain constraints, that sometimes fosters creativity. So we said, hey, let's make the song shorter. The idea was just to have solid foundations that we could build around. So a couple hooks. And then when we went to record, just try to layer as many things on top as possible, harmonies, guitar harmonies, all those kind of things that you'd hear on a Sweet record or something like that. Sure. But yeah, it was an intentional move towards having shorter songs and having a more cohesive maybe identity for how the whole album would play together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very cool, man. Yeah, no doubt. Like you said, yeah, the songs, that was definitely one of the first things I noticed was songs are a lot shorter on this record, which I also think that, though, that's what makes these songs so strong, because it really just gives it that nice, it's just, straight to the point, and one thing I love about it too, I mean, when you look at the song titles, titles like Steel and Wine, Black Market Bus Pass, We're All Gonna Get Signed, Haven't Got a Job. Overall, it just has that really old school spirit of rock and roll type of feel to it. Nothing really serious, just straight balls out and fun, which is refreshing since, we're hearing, and understandably, we've been hearing mostly a lot of downer stuff the last few years, of course, because of all the pandemic stuff. So to me, it's great to see someone, put the sort of fun back into rock and roll. And I kind of wish more would do that. So it's great to see that. What was the intention for the record and the band? Was it to do just that, to have that sort of youthful and carefree edge to it, the way rock and roll once was and was really initially about?
I think it was more of a reaction to like a lot of the how do I say? So I think a lot of the bands that were, when towards the end of Carousel 2014, 2015, there was a lot of like really dark imagery around, the psychedelic 70s hard rock scene. And we just wanted to, when we were thinking about doing the third Carousel album, which never came to be, but we wanted to do something that would set us apart and make even more of a statement than the albums that we had done up to that point. And I thought, you know what, let's make the song super short. how are we going to set ourselves apart? We're going to use imagery that is, we're going to use like brighter colors. We're going to use imagery that is taking us in a different direction. And then, so that, the band broke up obviously, but I still kind of had the idea. And then, some of my Pittsburgh buddies that had a really great band called Cruises, 3 of those guys contacted me a few months after Carousel ended, and we got together and I was like, hey, this is my idea. Let's see if this is something that works with what you guys want to do. And then eventually, I had a few songs ready to go, and then eventually they started bringing their own ideas in. But yeah, it was kind of just like a reaction to, what was going on at the time and just an attempt to set ourselves apart. It wasn't really so much like, let's go back to this time and try to relive this era. Although, I mean, I think it's very clear, like the era that we draw our influences from. That's obvious, but it was more a reaction to the climate of the time in that with that type of music.
Sure. No doubt. And the other thing too, when I hear the record, I mean, I really feel like I'm in a time warp, really going back about 45 years or so. I mean, and a lot of it has to do, as you mentioned before, really about the vocals on each track, especially on the choruses with the harmonies. When I listen to the album, like I said, I actually, the great thing about the album is when I listen to it, I'm streaming it, I feel like I'm listening to it on vinyl. And that's really tough to do, to get a streaming sound to sound like it's on vinyl. And that says it all. I mean, when you're streaming songs are sounding like it's on vinyl, I think, how much better can you get than that, in my opinion? So, I mean, how were you really able to get the tone and the pitch on those choruses with those harmonies? I mean, were those harmonies you did as a band, or did you use double tracking? I mean, talk a bit about the vocal approach on the record.
On the album, I did all of them. I think there's maybe one song that has a couple of the other guys on it.
Okay.
Then there's some gang vocals where we all did, but I think just mostly since then we've worked like Evan, the guitar player, he does a lot of harmony vocals. Okay. But just since, when you're in the studio and time is of the essence, and I had the most experience doing vocals in the studio, it just made, sense for me to do them. But since that time, we have incorporated the other guys, and actually the drummer Dan sings harmonies. Like when we do Steel and Wine live, he'll do the third harmony.
Okay.
But yeah, just a lot of double tracking, harmonizing, trying to just take the ideas that we thought were the foundations of the songs and just emphasize them with harmonies and stuff.
No question.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, I spend a good amount of time in Pittsburgh because I have a business there, and from what I know, I don't live there, so correct me on this, but there are 2 dominant musical rock metal styles out there. It's the hair metal throwback people, and it's the punk hardcore thing, like the Screaming Crow Records type crowd, the Cheats and bands like that.
It's funny you mentioned them because I'm acquaintances with Todd from the Cheats, and
sure.
Actually, my wife is from Switzerland, and she's friends with the guys in a band called the Bitch Queens. Okay. They did a U.S. tour, and they went out with the Cheats, so I spent a week on the road with him. But he's kind of a legend around here,
sure.
Todd, because of his background.
Absolutely.
I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, it's fine. Well, I guess my question is, I don't know that there's a scene there for what you do. So, is there? And if there is, where is it? Where do people play? Who do you play with?
There's not really a scene, I mean, anywhere for what we do.
Sure.
I think it's I think there's kind of there's some bands across the country that are kind of scattered across that I feel like I kind of bond with. We're working on setting up some shows with a band from from Asheville called Rocky Mountain Roller, that, you know, features a former member of Lecherous Gaze. And so there were some West Coast bands that maybe I felt like Lecherous Gaze. They're now no longer a band, but I guess there were some West Coast bands. Donova is a band, although, you know, taking it and running with the riff rock thing in a completely different direction.
The Shrine too. Shrine's another band I think you guys gotta.
Yeah. But you know, here, yeah, I mean, there's not really another band doing exactly what we do. Like I said, the other guys in the band had a band called CAROUSES, CRUCES, and they were a really great kind of, you know, they reminded me a lot of like Graveyard or something like that. Like the Scandinavian, like 70s influenced rock, a little more on the psychedelic side of things. But I mean, you know, we just do bills where there's like a line you can draw through all the bands, even though the bands don't sound anything similar. My wife has a band called Tiny Wars that does some like a power pop type of like late 70s punk, early 80s power pop type of thing. And it's like, even though we don't sound alike, it makes sense. It's like fun music.
Sure.
One band that I love is not from Pittsburgh, is called Brower from New York. I don't know if you've ever listened to any of their records, but it's got that like 70s glam thing going on, but like really well written songs. So I mean, I think that's a positive thing when you have some bands that have a similar sensibility, but none of them are like, you know, sounding too much like each other. I think that's a good thing. But yeah, the hardcore scene here in Pittsburgh there's always a really healthy like punk hardcore scene.
Sure.
That scene that you're kind of referring to, like the you know, Hanoi Rocks kind of glammy punk thing, that's definitely something that's been solid here. But then, you know, there's also a really strong DIY scene. And I think, I mean, when I started going to shows, those were the kind of shows that I was going to. I mean, this is, you know, 2004 or whatever, a long time ago. But there was a really, really strong DIY scene that a lot of really cool bands came out of. Don Caballero, you know, back then. And that's probably one of the like flagship bands. There was a garage rock band called Modi Lemon that did a lot of touring, and Grand Buffet, like, but like the thing that bound that scene together more than anything stylistic was just the feeling of empowerment that comes from releasing your own music, or not feeling limited by, you know, the options that are available in terms of like record.
Right.
So it's not always a musical style that binds, you know, groups of people together. Sometimes it's a sensibility or a state of mind. But yeah, I mean, there's not really a band that does what we do, I guess. But that's on purpose. We don't want, we don't want to do what anyone else is doing.
Totally.
Right. No, you're right. And you know, the interesting thing is the similar, there is a scene for the similar sounding, you know, obviously the stoner rock bands have a sort of a similar sound, but it's a little more, you know, down-tuned and darker. But honestly, with that scene rising up, I think eventually you're going to see the style that you do kind of get pulled in, just because people are looking for variations of that, which is what I think you guys sort of, you kind of bridge the gap between the glam thing and the stoner thing, which I think is going to be appealing to a lot of people. I think it's just not quite there yet. Do you think that that's the way it's working?
I hope it works that way. You know, I mean, the way we do it is just, you know, you've got to make music to make yourself happy first. And then, you know, obviously it makes me happy if people like it, and I get sad if they don't. And I'd be lying if I said that wasn't true. But I mean, the primary thing is just to make ourselves happy, make music we believe in. But I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I think one thing that those bands do really well, like the stoner rock doom scenes, like they create a mood, you know, and people really enjoy, you know, going out for a night and being immersed in that mood. And I mean, I think that stuff is here to stay. And I think a lot of those bands, though, when they do listen to rock and roll, it's this type of thing.
Right.
So that's kind of where, you know, you get some of the folks from that scene being interested, is because, you know, like they don't always want to be in experiencing like that same kind of mood, and when they're in the mood for something more up tempo and rock and roll, it does seem to be this kind of thing. So I mean, yeah, it's tough to see how it'll play out, but I guess we'll just try to take it on the road and test it out and see where it goes.
Right.
Totally. Yeah. But what is your thoughts on that whole stoner rock label? I know a lot of bands can't stand it. You know, that's just, I guess maybe because it's just so, you know, they try to just lump it all into one genre. You know, like you said, like you guys don't really sound any, like you said, your Limousine Beach sounds completely different than say Carousel, but of
Mhm.
course most journalists are pretty lazy and they just sort of, basically just throw everything into the whole stoner rock
Yeah,
genre. And a lot of artists hate it, you know?
it happens with, like, you know, anything that harkens back to the 70s era or something like that. Like,
Mm,
sometimes you do get a lot of lazy reviews that are like, hey, throwback to the 70s, not, and it's like, well, there was a lot going on in the 70s. You know,
Right.
you had David
mm,
Bowie, you had Sabbath, you had Deep Purple, you had, you know, you had punk music, you had the Dictators, you had all
mhm,
those bands right around happening at the same time. So you're not really saying anything by saying like, hey, these bands are influenced by music of the 70s. Like, what music? So
mhm,
yeah, that does strike me as like a little bit lazy. In terms of uh, the stoner rock scene, I mean, I just think, um, you know, that the people that have that label probably aren't crazy about the label either, because it pigeonholes you. And then
mm,
I think it's just like any other genre, you know, like there are some outstanding bands from every genre, and then like every genre just has like, you know, other bands that kind of just like, you know, pick up a guitar and aren't really bringing anything interesting to it, and it's not really you know, any different than any other genre, though. Maybe it's a I think with that type of music, maybe there's more people doing it just because they go, hey, it's slow. I
mhm,
you know, I can pick up a guitar and just kind of like make it. But like when you look at the bands that do it really well, they're bringing this kind of like intangible thing to it. And most of them are drawing from other sources for inspiration when you look really closely.
mhm,
So but you know, it's like we all love the same stuff. It's like Sabbath, all those bands, it's like, you know, we like the same stuff. It's just where you take it that
mhm.
makes
Right.
a difference.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Dave, what I mentioned earlier, I mean, you were obviously, in two other very well-respected bands prior to Limousine Beach, Outside, Inside, and Carousel. With Carousel, obviously, you said you put two great records out with TP. Outside, Inside, Sniff a Hot Rock is such a really cool and catchy record. And I was saying, all three bands are definitely, within the same arena, but very different. Are you the type of musician who, you have that sort of strong need to, really not get bogged down into one band or project so that you can have those sort of separate creative outlets to do the things, that you want to do depending on maybe what you're feeling at the time?
It's never been as intentional as that. It's just, you know, when Jim and I were in Carousel, um, we Carousel, although it was, you know, obviously influenced by the same era of music as Outside Inside, it was
Mhm,
leaning a little bit more towards like new wave of British heavy metal,
mhm,
on like the heavier end of it. And we wanted to maybe do some stuff that went a little more towards our, you know, our roots as fans of like Free and Humble Pie and that kind of thing. So that's kind of where Outside Inside came from.
mhm,
And that's still a band. We put a record out in March 2020, early March, right before everything shut down. It was like the last weekend that
mhm,
shows were happening. So we got a record out, and we do play now. We haven't booked any shows. We're kind of taking it slow and just writing, and we want to get a whole new set together before we play out. But that band's still there. I think, you know, I never had any like big idea about like I need to express myself in these different outlets. It's just kind of what the ones that popped up along the way, you know.
Mhm.
What I'd like to do, it would be really cool to have a band that, you know, you look at those bands from like the 70s and how they changed on each album, and it seemed like the bands in a lot of cases were an outlet for every musical impulse that the people in the band
Mhm.
had. And so
Mhm.
it would be cool to like see that, you know, a band progress. So who knows, maybe in the future it just becomes a one band thing and it's completely different from album to album. We're actually talking about, you know, how what we want to do on the next Limousine Beach album. It doesn't it and it's probably going to be a lot different than the first one.
Mhm. Well, do you think a lot of the listeners these days, it seems like it's almost like you have to sort of have those separate bands. A lot of listeners, music listeners these days, especially rock fans, it's like if you are a band, say for instance, if Limousine Beach, if you guys go ahead and maybe completely change, not completely change, but alter your sound a little bit on your next record, people might be like, ah, this isn't Limousine Beach, So in a way, a lot of musicians almost have to now have these separate, projects and bands in order to do what they want to do instead of just putting it under one banner, under one band. Because a lot of, I think because there's just so much out there now, the market's so, saturated,
Yeah.
that it's hard to do that when, like you said, in the past, yeah, bands could just continue to progress and play different types of, sounds within the genre with one outfit, where now it's like you almost need multiple outlets to do that in a way.
Well, I think there are some benefits to having a certain amount of anonymity as
Yeah,
we have
true. True.
household names.
Mhm.
And I mean, I don't think there would be any pressure from, you know, TP to be like, hey, make the same album again. You know, they're always very, you know, hands off when it comes to the creative side of it. Uh,
Mhm.
you know, I guess I'm reminded of Rush, you know, in the documentary where Paul, like what Alex Lifeson's talking about playing the early mixes of Caress of Steel for Paul Stanley, and he just, you know, and then he just didn't understand it, and the
Mhm.
label didn't understand what they were doing, and there was a lot of pressure for that. But you know, they went ahead and made 2112. So I think again, like you just, I'm only interested in making music that I believe in. If there is some like external pressure to do the same thing, I mean, that's real, but I mean, you can just ignore that, you
Mhm.
know.
Right.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Right. Nice. Well, Dave, I'm curious just because I have not seen the band yet, but since we're talking a lot about the influence from the 70s styled bands, is the live experience a completely different, maybe not completely because the music's similar, the same, the way it's presented, but is it a different experience from the record? And I'll point to like David Bowie as an example. Bowie had those, you knew the songs, but when you saw him live, it really gave a whole different aura to what he was doing. Are you guys in that similar vein, sort of?
Um, I mean, I think so. What we try to do with the set is say, you know, you got your songs,
Hmm.
and you have an opportunity live to communicate, to add this other aspect to how it's being communicated.
Sure.
So what we tried to do is take the songs and think about how, like, what's the kind of experience we want people to have when they're listening to this, and we want the song to like hit like this, like, you know, in my mind when I thought about the track listing for the album, um, I had in mind like the SOD album, where you
Mm.
listen to it and it's like all the songs are like a minute and a half or less. And it's
Mhm.
like,
Right.
obviously, it's a different style of music. But
Mm.
so the idea is to kind of like exaggerate that live. So we have as few breaks between songs as possible. We've worked out transitions. There's only like one or two, you know, two or three places. It's a 13 song set. So there's like two or three places in the set where there's a break and, you know, something is said. A lot of that stuff is actually worked into a song while like there's music playing. So we did try to compose a set that is, it's individual songs, but it's one cohesive thing in and of itself. So you got the individual songs, and then you have the entire set, and those are two different experiences. So and there's no breathing fire, hey, I'm not opposed to any of this. We'll see how it develops now that we're playing some more shows. But I think the thing is just to go out, play the songs as energetically as possible, and have a set composed that communicates the overall feel that we want to get across live, instead of, I think for our songs, it would take the wind out of it to take 30, 40 seconds in between songs, like wander around aimlessly, tuning, staring at each other. So we've tried to really work out those kinks and rehearse through them at the practice space, so that, when we get on stage, we're ready to go.
Very good, man. Well, obviously the new release is called Limousine Beach, as it is also the name of the band. And Dave, where should we send people to keep up with you guys, tour dates, get the record, all that good stuff?
Our Facebook page, Limousine Beach, Instagram, limobeach.pgh. And TP Records has updates about us too. So if you go to their website, their social media, but yeah, really where you're going to get the most is probably like Instagram and Facebook about us.
Very good, man. Well, one more time, the new release is just simply called Limousine Beach. It is also the name of the band. And Dave, thanks so much for joining us here on Aftershocks.
Hey, thank you. It was a lot of fun, and definitely humbled to be interviewed, and I appreciate you guys having me on the show.
Absolutely. Sure, yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, like I said, it's an awesome record, man. We the more you listen to it, the better it gets. That's what's great about it. That's the holding power it's got, the staying power. So great job, man.
That really means a lot. That means the fact that you even listened to it more than once. Thank you very much.
When it's time to rock, it's time to tune in to Crash Course Radio. Featuring the very best of the heavier music, from Slayer to Clutch to Fear Factory, it's all in one place, Crash Course Radio. To tune in to Crash Course Radio, simply visit www.cmsradio.net. You can also tune in on the CMS Network app by opening the app, clicking the musical notes at the top right corner, and selecting Crash Course Radio from our stations. All the best heavy music is there, so you should be too. Ditch the commercial radio and make Crash Course Radio your everyday station.